Hey, today I am going to be tapping into the tea with Dan Daddario. He's the chief correspondent at Variety, and he's also the author of a novel called The Talent. Dan has just spent years observing and writing about the entertainment industry, fame, performance, and all the narratives that go with all of that shape how we each see artists, how we see Hollywood, how we see fame, how we see culture. So I do want to say, which we'll get into, in The Talent, his book, which really is a great book, he brings that insider's eye to the fictional awards season, which is just really fun to zoom into because he obviously takes a lot of what he's seeing and puts it into the story where he explores the ambition, rivalry, image, and what it means to be seen. So we're going to hit on all that and more. Thank you for joining me, Dan.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Oh my gosh, Dan, how'd you get into this career? This is a very interesting segue.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. I guess just persistence. I always knew that I wanted to write magazine articles. I was growing up in the 90s, was a real kind of golden age of magazines and magazine profiles and really insightful writing about artists and actors and directors. And I was just very passionate about it. So I kind of just incrementally worked to initially working at a small local newspaper in New York, and then where I still live, and then kind of building and building and building experience. And I feel very fortunate to be here now.
As you know, it's quite a coveted position to be a chief correspondent at such a esteemed, Hollywood publication, or entertainment publication. Who doesn't know Variety?
Well, thanks for saying that. No, I'm definitely aware of how fortunate I am, not merely to have a job and a title, but also to really, when you're interviewing someone, it's such a privileged position. You have, when else in life does one, I suppose you can relate, have the freedom to ask someone anything that comes into your mind and be inquisitive and curious and perhaps nosy. All of these are traits I would have had in the first place, but I'm curious about people. I'm curious about what motivates them, and I get to just ask, which is so lucky.
Isn't that so cool? That's what I
Yeah.
genuinely love about interviewing people.
Yeah.
You get to ask questions and I don't come to anything prescriptive. I go with the flow. I see what someone says. I certainly have things in mind I want to get to, but it's so interesting what can come out in as an interview gets more comfortable and
Mhm.
relaxed and the
Yes.
flow goes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I would never call myself scripted. I definitely prepare because I like to think a lot of preparation is kind of the
Yes.
safety net. But when you're speaking to someone, if you just throw questions at them like tennis balls from the tennis ball machine, you're not going to get people just shut down if they feel as though you're too scripted. So to be able to be flexible and actually listen to what someone says and respond with a meaningful response that actually incorporates what they said is a skill that I've hopefully developed, a skill obviously that you have. And I think that spontaneity is key. I think anyone listening to a podcast interview or reading an interview in a magazine wants to feel as if they're getting something real. And because so much of this world feels scripted and fake. And so you want to give them a moment of frankness and reality.
Okay, so I'm just curious. I need an inside scoop.
Okay.
Did you have a favorite question that kind of gets things going?
Gets things going. I mean, not that I could say because I think everyone is so
Indeed.
different. I genuinely think that if I'm talking to someone and I want to really kind of get to know them, I like to start by talking about their work because I think for a lot of people in the arts, that's very closely held. They're passionate about what they do. They really care about it. And if I can indicate that I saw it and understood it or tried my best, then they can kind of feel comfortable with me to say, okay, well, I'll go down this road with you. But I don't know. I don't have any one kind of like, tell me about your childhood. Like, I don't have any like one skeleton key that opens stuff up. Everyone
Mhm.
is so different. And that's the exciting challenge.
That's funny. I always say I never go for, that jugular or that question that's going to throw someone off hand. But the more you talk to someone, the more things get volunteered if you're listening. And I
Yes.
think that's a good rule in life. If you really want to get to know somebody, the more you really pay attention to what they're saying. And I'm genuinely interested. I love you. I love my guests. I have a painting I bought years ago in my apartment that says I fall in love at least twice a day. And I just think I do because
Yeah.
I just enjoy getting to know someone. And there's no phone interrupting, no dings.
Yeah, no, it's rare in life, other than situations like this or situations like me interviewing someone, to have a conversation that's not totally distracted, right? And so I'm like you in this way. I would be the worst kind of hard-nosed investigative journalist. I would be really bad at being Mike Wallace on 60 Minutes, kind of yelling at
Yeah.
someone, because I similarly, by the time I'm done researching someone and reading up on them and watching the work they've done and talking to them and thinking about them, by the end, I'm like, oh, you have such a good soul. Like I just I don't know that I would say fall in love, but I tend to develop a real admiration for the people I write about just because I have such a familiarity by the end of the process.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite interviews that stand out in your mind?
That's a good question. I think that one of my favorite interviews was a piece I wrote a few years ago at this point about a Cuban actress named Ana de Armas, who's been in a bunch of movies. She's an Oscar nominee. And I met her kind of as her career was picking up, and I found her very emotionally compelling. It was a very deep interview. It was very emotional. And I found it was an early example of kind of, for me in my career, of kind of going with the flow of where someone was going because I didn't always know what was coming next. And I found that very compelling. Recently, I interviewed Jodie Foster for the cover of Variety, and that was a real highlight just because she's someone I
It's
admire
Jodie
so
Foster.
much. Exactly. What more can I say? Hello. Like she's someone I admire so much and I find so brilliant and intellectual, and speaking with her was like very stimulating to my mind. And so that was really fun as well.
It's so funny you mentioned Jodie Foster because not too long ago, our son is very into 70s culture. And I
Oh, sure.
rewatched Taxi Driver with
Yeah.
him. I had the scene in I don't even know how many years.
Right.
Then that night, I was talking with my husband. And I'm like, I've rewatched. I said, I can't believe how long, Jodie Foster's been around and the kind of acting she's done. And then we watched, what was it, Hannibal Lecter or whatever
Oh,
that.
the Silence of the Lambs. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, talk about a diverse career and a deep career. And
Yeah.
I mean, the talent is incredible.
The talent indeed. No, I mean, if you want to go back and read my piece, she talks a lot about being a young teenager. I believe she was 14 when she filmed Taxi Driver. And kind of she'd been acting since she was a baby. Uh, but this was an early example of like actually realizing that acting was a craft and not just you show up, you read your lines, and that's that. Like you actually transform into the character. I found it very interesting to talk about like her discovering that and her being mentored by Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese, and then that having such an impact on the incredible actor and person she is today. It's often not to be too long-winded, but often early formative experiences like that are really interesting to talk about when you're interviewing someone because it's the moment the kind of key turns in the lock and they realize something that they didn't know before is like a can be a very transformative moment in life.
Well, not only that, when I was rewatching that movie, I said, how old was she here?
Hmm.
Such a young kid. I mean, we're not talking about Macaulay Culkin playing Home Alone where you're laughing. We're
Right.
talking about an extremely intense script in her and with Harvey Keitel. What an intense script for such a young person. And I always wonder how those kind of things impact someone psychologically because you're living that character. You can't just walk on and turn it on. You know,
Well,
you're
100%. I would agree with that, but I think she's fortunate that she had good people around her,
uh-huh.
seems to have a very good head on her shoulders. But of course, that you can't help but impact you. I just think she's profoundly well adjusted. And so was
Yeah.
able to take that in stride where a lot of former child actors don't.
Yeah. Really fascinating. Really fascinating. Now, at some point, oh, wait a second. I still need to ask you another question
Go
about
on, go on. Yeah.
interviewing people.
Okay.
So when you look back on different interviews, did you ever have an interview that totally just you said, you don't even have to say who it is, you know, "Ooh, I need part 2 to that," or "I never wanna have a part 2 to that."
Um I in as much
And you don't necessarily have to say who it is.
I wouldn't say who it is because it wouldn't be their fault. The fault would be on me because I think that as time goes by, I increasingly realize that barring extreme edge cases, pretty much anyone has the capacity to be interesting and personable and insightful in an interview. And if they're not, it's my fault for asking the wrong questions. I think earlier in my career, especially at previous jobs, I was often really locked in on I have my script, these are my 15 questions, let me run through them. And people just when you present them with that, they just kind of go and power down. It's not if you were reading me questions off a list, I would just kind of be wishing I was looking at my phone, right? And so I think that in as much as there are definitely times I'm thinking of where I've had interviews where just I realize it's not going well, we're not vibing, it's because I'm not being spontaneous and not really listening. Not really listening. So like listening is key.
That is profoundly self-reflective, and I'm so happy you say that because I'm now curious, how do you translate that into your personal life when you're not interviewing a celebrity?
Uh that's a really good question. I think that I'm parenting two very young children, and I think that listening is key in that regard as well. I think my hope is that they feel heard when I ask them how their day at school was. And you're a parent as well. You can relate, perhaps, that when I ask how was school, good. Well, what
Yeah.
did you do? I don't know. Well, what'd you eat for lunch? I forget. It's like you have to really be quite an investigative journalist to suss out anything. And
Mhm,
so I've brought that to bear in my home life as well of just kind of being patient, hopefully, being a listener and just creating a space in which
mhm.
people hopefully feel heard.
You know what? It's funny. With that kind of listening and communication with children, I always found at night, I got my best answers just saying, I'll lay down with you 5 minutes before you go to I'll read a book and then I'll turn off the lights in 5 minutes or whatever. I'll lay down with you. I got the most true confessions or things that were on either of our children's minds in those 5 minutes. It was like as soon as the light went out. So then I would start to do it. I'd say, okay, I can't keep laying down in everybody's bed. I'm exhausted. I'm falling asleep after this. But
Right.
so I just say, you know, let's just sit with the lights out for a few minutes.
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
unbelievable when you're in darkness with a child
Yes.
what they want to talk about.
I
Almost
found,
like
yeah.
the Catholic confessionals. You went into those dark rooms and they were pitch dark, and maybe that's part of what made people speak up. I don't know.
I've found this to be very true as well. I was just talking to another parent about this at a kid's birthday party, is that suddenly it's maybe it's because you've created a space that feels safe, like they feel
Yeah.
snuggly, and they're also vulnerable. I certainly my own children like hate bedtime, are scared of going to bed, and so they're simultaneously like physically comfortable because they're lying down snuggled up, but also aware that something really scary is about to happen. They're about to fall asleep and have dreams, and
Mhm.
so they this is some alchemical thing happens
Yeah.
where they just open up in what I agree is a very sweet way.
Yeah. Okay. So at some point, you got the idea to write a book
That's
called
true.
The Talent.
That's
Let's
true.
talk about how that moved from interviewing people, observing Hollywood, firsthand observing entertainment, talent, fame, reactions to all that, and you
Yeah.
put it into a book.
It's true. It's all true. No, so the talent, which
It's
is
all true.
it's all true. Well, the book, what you said is all true. The book's made up. Uh, but the book, which is out in paperback now, it follows five actresses who are nominated together for, the most prestigious award that you could possibly win, Best Actress. And obviously this opens up feelings of envy, of nerves, of resentments, old resentments between each other kind of coming to the fore, new friendships being formed. It's, you know, I am fortunate in the job that I do to spend a great deal of time covering the season around the Academy Awards, right? And so I've seen firsthand the way so-called campaigns work, which my big insight watching it was this is incredibly exhausting for the people doing it. They spend 6 months of their lives going from place to place, being told they'll win a big award and get 3 minutes to say whatever they want on television. Um, it's overwhelming to just live in that state of anticipation.
Do they lobby for this award? Like,
Well, they
how does
they
that
do
work?
in subtle ways. So if you're an actor or an actress, so-called campaigning for an award, you don't say, you're not being like a politician being like, vote for me, but you make yourself very available. You do a lot of interviews, for instance, talking about how hard you worked and how emotional the work was and how much of yourself you put into it. You go to cocktail parties where voters will be and shake their hands and say, thank you for coming out. I'm really proud of my work. So it's not like so explicit, but it's 1 degree more implicit where you're lobbying in sort of a sub rosa way, but it's a huge outlay of time and emotional investment because it's very taxing to talk about yourself for 6 months, as you would imagine. And so, yeah, it's a very interesting phenomenon that I've observed even in the time I've been doing my job over the past 5 or so years get like vastly, vastly, vastly more scaled up.
Mhm.
It's bigger and more intense time-wise now than it's ever been.
To during the Academy Awards or the
Exactly.
Golden Globes.
To campaign
Mhm.
and travel all over the world to get people to notice you.
Why do you think that is? Is it just the glut of content? Is it the advent of and the competition of television at the same time? The cost of these productions? What do you think the factors would be?
Yeah, well, I think here's what I think. I think that the content glut, as you called it, which I think is apt, there's a million different outlets nowadays, and for that reason, something that cuts through the noise, it feels more valuable. Like, I go home at night and watch a show that you may never have heard of, and you're watching a show that I've never heard of, but we've both heard of the Oscars, and so has probably 90% of the people listening to us speak. And so for that reason, it feels more valuable than ever to have something that it feels like the entire world is paying attention to for a moment. And so I also just think, yeah, it just cuts through the noise.
Mhm. How do you think streaming? Let's go back to your variety hat. Does
Okay.
variety cover streaming things and events different than films? Like how's variety now balancing their coverage?
In a different way. I think that we just cover them uh, at an appropriate level to their importance to the industry, which is huge. And
Mhm.
so we just spend a lot of time thinking and talking about streaming events, streaming programs, streaming culture, the streaming wars, which is,
Mhm.
who will prevail, Netflix, HBO Max, Paramount Plus. Eventually, some of these will fall away. And we cover all of that aggressively because I think that for most people, streaming over the last 15 years or so has effectively become very central to their experience of entertainment. Like, we don't go to the video store on the weekends anymore. We surf around Netflix. And so I think that that's a change that's real, that's happened, that's not going away. And that I think we just cover it as the news, which it is.
Have you interviewed in your role as a chief correspondent of Variety? Have you interviewed any actors, whether like Billy Bob Thornton or a Jason Bateman or any of the ones who have, done mega films, yet they've done incredible I'm using Netflix like the word
Yeah,
Bambi.
sure.
I don't know what channel they aired on,
Sure.
series that, going from TV to almost soap opera, but
Right,
it's not
right,
a
right.
soap opera, but that's what it was when I was growing up. If
Well,
you have it continued.
the transition you could compare it to, right, is silent movies to sound movies, right? It's a shift that has kind of changed everything. And so yeah, of course, it would be strange if I hadn't interviewed people who had streaming shows or streaming movies, just because that's such a huge proportion of where the energy, heat, and crucially money is right now. It's you know, it's just kind of the heart of the industry. And so of course I've interviewed plenty of people for their streaming shows, but the at the heart of it all, the mechanism is different. The way we watch is different, but I think in the end, the the heart of it is the same. I think that when you're making a show for streaming, hopefully you're not thinking this is a streaming show and so we're streaming it and X, Y, Z, it's different. It's you want it to be a good story, well told, with relatable performances that capture your heart and make you laugh and cry. That hasn't changed even as the way we're watching it has changed.
Do you think any of that has favorably or adversely impacted any actors' careers?
Well, the example I cited, silent to sound, adversely affected many people's careers because they didn't have voices for speaking, and they were better silent
Right.
actors. I think streaming, it's harder to say that it's adversely affected like actors' careers, because I think that uh, you know, like I say, the the mechanism may have changed, but kind of what makes an actor successful
Hmm.
remains pretty constant. I think that overall across the industry, there was a big boom and much, much, much more television than anyone can ever consume, which meant that there was really good employment. And now that retraction and it's kind of contracting now, and there's less TV than there used to be, is affecting people's careers in that there's just less work to go around. And I find that, since the conclusion of the writers and actors strikes of 2023, it's just been a tougher environment. And I find that obviously sad.
Hmm. And it's interesting how the movie business has changed, from theaters, and then you hear about the decline in theaters. Yet I have a 26-year-old daughter who's like, Mom, I have a movie membership
Oh
and
yeah.
you should go. It's the greatest thing. She goes with her friends. She goes with herself. Like, she's like, I just love this. She goes, I've seen every movie that came out this year.
There's right now, as in like the moment we're speaking, there's a ton of energy around movies that basically hasn't been since the conclusion of the
That's
pandemic,
what I'm
right?
seeing. It
Is
seems like a
is Yeah.
resurgence to
It's
go to the
it's
theater.
it's very exciting. And for people, I'm in my late 30s, for people 10 or 15 years younger than I am, I think that the experience of being around people, not to make everything about this, but like COVID happened at like a very formative time in these young folks' lives where they missed out on experiences that should have been really communal, like college graduation, let's say, or just the end of college or the end of high school. And so to be around people and laugh together and at a horror movie scream together, it feels like really heartening. And I think it's coming back in a really big way. And the numbers bear this out. Like, so that's very exciting to see, because for a while with streaming, which has its utility, and I love putting on Netflix at the end of the day, just like anyone else, for a while, it felt as though theaters were really imperiled. And I think there's a path forward.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because when I think of, streaming, you think of home isolation,
Right.
like, and not that that's a negative. I like to sit and read a good book,
Yeah, of
but
course.
that there's a huge difference between going out, being in a club, being entertained, being with other people in a movie theater, because you're picking up all that kind of energy. I always say when one of our kids will describe a scene in the movie that was scary, and they'll always say, everybody jumped, or
Hmm.
you could hear the crowd. So there's also something that I think people enjoy with that because they know I'm not the only one who got really scared there.
Right, exactly. I mean, this is part of their utility. This is why we love them. Is it's there's nothing wrong with spending time with oneself and having that experience, but to be able to be part of a group and be
Yeah.
in community with people that you never met before and will never see again, it's just cool. It's just fun. It's what entertainment was created for, is to be in community with others. And so I personally really love it, and I'm glad that your kids do too.
Yeah. Now, now I'm curious since we talked about interviewing people, movies, and we've mentioned kids. Is there any actor that you would say, "Oh, my kids would think that was a total score if I interviewed them."
Well, my younger daughter is only 3, and so she, I think, would
Okay,
just think it was a score if I, like, met the dogs from Paw Patrol.
there you go.
But yeah,
I'm
but my
for Elmo and the
yeah.
Wiggles.
Yeah, absolutely. My older daughter is starting to have a consciousness about these things, and I think that she really loves Cruella, like all the iterations, and so I think she has an awareness of who Emma Stone is because Emma Stone played Cruella, and I think she has a great affection for her. And so I think that that would be, if I ever reel that in, I will have her esteem for the better part of an hour.
That's hilarious because I'm thinking Glenn Close was
Well, she likes that version too, but the newest version is the one that she really goes up for.
so right now, do you get assigned who you interview or do you get to put in your preferences?
There 90% of the time it's an assignment, but that's the exciting challenge, which is oftentimes something is put before me and I go, "Oh, I never really thought about them. I don't have an opinion either way. I don't have a take. I don't know what to ask." And then I have to dig deep, go back, watch their movies and really think about it. And that is very stimulating to me.
How much time do you put in to prep? Because now you're saying you go back, you read, you watch some movies. What does prep look like for an interview? Because, and I want to get to that because a lot of people think, oh, I could do that person's job, but they don't understand what goes into that job and getting to the level you're at, in an entertainment industry.
Well, sure. I mean, I want to say I think that a lot of people probably could do my job, but they would have to be willing to do the work. I don't think that it's per se specialized. I'm ultimately just having conversations. It's just there is a lot of prep to do it the way I want to do it. And so I think that I don't know that I could put a time marker on it because it happens over the course of weeks. It's reading their past interviews because you want them to be saying things that they haven't necessarily said before, watching their films, watching their shows, and really, 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 while I'm spontaneous in the moment, I like to kind of game out, well, if we talk about this, what logically follows from that? What would be a way to transition the conversation forward? And I kind of map all that out in writing. So I have it in my brain so that I know I just basically just never want to be caught flat-footed and have 5 seconds of going, okay, wow. So, I'm not scripted, but I do have a path in my mind that I think has hopefully served me well. And yeah, I just work on that. I often have weeks of lead time, and those weeks are spent very constructively.
About how many articles do you write a year? And what's the word
um,
roughly?
yeah, so I mean, I write many, many short articles just over the course of a week, but in terms of like major things like what I'm describing, I do about 10 a year and they're about 4,000 words a piece. And yeah,
That
so
does seem
it's sizable when you put it in terms like that.
Yeah. Wow, you do have to prepare to be able to come up with 4,000 words in anything. That's a lot because I imagine that the beginning draft could have been 12,000 words that you slowly edited.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's always the challenge actually, is not getting to 4,000, but getting down to 4,000.
Yeah.
Is I have so much I want to say. I had this experience. I met someone. I could tell you about it for days. And then reducing
Yeah.
is the challenge.
Always.
Yeah.
That's why they say writing and editing are very different things.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Because of course I'm sentimentally attached to every word I write, of course.
Of
So
course.
uh, uh reducing and deciding what is actually important versus what I just thought was cool is, that's why writers have editors who can look at it dispassionately.
Yeah, it's funny. I wrote years ago, I wrote a book and I gave it to my best friend who's a remarkable editor. And she returned it to me and she had used a red Sharpie to make
Oh
edits.
no, the page
And
was bleeding.
that's exactly it. It looked like someone had used it to mop up a crime scene. So
Oh no.
upset. I don't think I talked to her for 2 weeks. I calmed down. I'm like, okay, I can learn from some of these edits.
When I get a tough edit, which I'm human, happens, I do need to take, like, I'm on deadline, things have to move, but like I take an hour to just go like, exhale, okay, like it's okay. You're not a bad person just because you need to be edited. You're not inept. You're not bad at your job. You're supposed to be edited. That's the goal, to make it better. And so, but being unsentimental about it is hard, especially with something like a book that you worked on so hard.
Ah, it's all a learning process. Oh my gosh, Dan, I have loved every bit of this interview. If there's anything I missed, there are going to be all kinds of links to you below.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you. If you found this in any way interesting, I would encourage you to check out my book because it really contains both a lot of insights I've had about celebrity, but also friendships and jokes. And so I just really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk and have a really good conversation, Diane.
It's a pleasure. And Dan's book is now available in paperback. There's no reason at all not to run and buy it.
Bring
Get
it to the
some for
beach.
friends. It's perfect beach reading, summer reading. Hey, winter reading by the fireplace if you're on the other side of the continent.
Great.
So please subscribe. Follow Dan. That's Dan Daddario. He's the chief correspondent at Variety. He's also the author of The Talent, which is a great novel. I highly recommend you pick up. I'm Dian Griesel. I'm also known as Silver Dispedience. This is the Silver Dispedience Perception Dynamics podcast. Hit subscribe. Follow all the links below when you're not driving. And I look forward to seeing you the next time. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay, we are signing off and going to the green room. See you next time. Hit subscribe. Follow the links.